Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The pomp and circumstance of the holidays have come and gone. The New Year's in full swing. It's time to get back to work and start off a huge year for yours truly with the first podcast of 2026, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as last Monday in 2025, I welcome you guys and gals back. And before I begin in what's going to be a jam-packed podcast to start off this first full week of the new year, as it's currently January the 5th. And I do want to say, first and foremost, this is going to be a big year. I understand I could say that for every year. I'm sure at this time last year I was saying the same thing, so on and so forth. But there is a lot coming down the pike, whether it's on the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, which I implore you to subscribe. I'm going to come out with some content regarding the Steelers. I get it, it's a niche when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but some experiences with me, family, and the Steelers, especially this time of the year. In fact, just to give you a little insight, I'm looking to do a 4-part series based on the Super Bowl 40 playoff run and them winning a Super Bowl, which is now the 20th anniversary, which is just mind-boggling to even think, let alone digest it. So that is one particular thing that's going to be on the channel you definitely want to look forward to. But not only that, with live streams, if you missed it last night, I did a live stream of the Ravens-Steelers game, which you know I'm going to unpack, people. So that's coming up right on deck. But I'm also going to have another one next Monday with the playoff game where the Texans will visit Pittsburgh to play the Steelers in the wild card round, which conclude the wild card weekend. So I got a lot cooking. And this is going to be a big year. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers and beyond to try to monetize this platform, among many other things. So please, people, stay with your boy. If this is your first day being a part of watching this podcast and being a part of this channel, please hit subscribe. I promise you it's going to be a great ride. And for those, my day ones, you know how much I appreciate you, your support, your unwavering, just everything when it comes to what it is that I'm trying to do here. Deliver credible, entertaining, informative sports talk without the clickbait, rage bait nonsense. 2026 is going to be that and then some, I can promise you. So please, for those who are part of the Reels Rascals, the Reels Rockers, whatever you want to call it, again, this is your time and our time when I think about it, as far as us trying to get to the next level and beyond when it comes to this platform, talking sports in a passionate, true, real fashion, not in a clickbait, rage bait, just artificial way. You're never going to get that here. So that's where I applaud you, commend you, and implore you to subscribe if you haven't done so. So I just wanted to get that out of the gate. It's got a lot of content, not only just the podcast and live streams, of course, every Wednesday at 12 noon. Thinking about doing some more evening live streams, as evidence is last night, which was a success. Thankfully, the end result was even bigger and better, which if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, you can see by the shirt I'm wearing as an indication of why that is the case. So now that I got that out of the way, I have to say the NFL here over the last few weeks, and we talked about this right past the halfway point, where it looked like the second half of the season was going to be kind of a thud. That with the way the league was shaping, so many teams under 500, very few teams in the mix as far as the wild card in both the AFC and NFC. And yes, you did have seeding and positioning, which was imperative, and a case where win or go home, or in the case of the NFC South, was win and wait 24 hours to see whether or not you're going to go home, even if you lose for that matter. And these last 3 weeks, the NFL went out like a lion. I mean, you couldn't have scripted it any better. Think about 2 weeks ago when the Rams went to Seattle to play for the NFC West, in essence, and how the Seahawks were down 30-16 in the fourth quarter, came all the way back thanks to a big punt return. And then you had that crazy 2-point conversion, and the way that game ended in overtime and them winning it in overtime with the 2-point conversion. That was the beginning of what we've seen here throughout the last couple of weeks, to where you had a scenario with the AFC North with the Steelers losing in Cleveland of all places, where King Henry, aka Derrick Henry, rushed for 4 touchdowns and 216 yards to keep them alive for another week. Then you had last Sunday night, the game in San Francisco, where the Bears and Niners were mano-a-mano back and forth until you got the final play of the game, where Caleb Williams throws it into the end zone, incomplete, and the Bears lose. Now, it didn't lose their standing in the NFC. They do have a 2 seed, even with them losing yesterday. But the Eagles also lost, so the Bears will, at best, have 2 home games in their building if they survive this week against the Packers, which we'll talk about the wildcard schedule in a little bit. But now it leads into this past weekend, where you had the 2 games on Saturday. The first game with Carolina and Tampa, which, let's face it, that was a ho-hum, boring game. Tampa had a lead. Tampa was in control. I understand that the Panthers tried to make it interesting late, but with some weird calls, a pass interference call on the wide receiver McMillan, which made no sense. And then you had that lateral play, which they whistled it dead, but then they said it was out of bounds. It was a loss of 7 yards. I mean, just strange circumstances there in Tampa. But the Buccaneers won, and now they had to wait to see what was going to happen between the Saints and Falcons, because I'm sure you well know by now, where if the Falcons won, that means they would have put themselves in a 3-way tie at the top of the NFC South at 8-9 with the aforementioned Bucs and Panthers. And because of the 3-way tie, that meant that the Carolina Panthers would win the division. And of course, the Buccaneers were rooting long and hard for the Saints to win, because if that would have been the case, then the tiebreaker would have gone to the Buccaneers, and they would have won the NFC South. As it was, we saw what happened there with the Falcons winning, and because of the 3-way tie, the Carolina Panthers back into an NFC South championship, to where they're going to host the first playoff game against the LA Rams there on Saturday. More on that a little bit later. So, very anticlimactic, very ho-hum, had to wait the next day, and then only to find out that the Panthers were able to win a division. I don't know if that's one you want to celebrate, considering that I know the coach is going to spin it. Hey, we got in, we were fortunate, we were lucky, we'll send a late Christmas card to the front office of the New Orleans Saints for beating, or for the Falcons, I should say, for beating the Saints there yesterday afternoon. But then the game Saturday night were Seattle and San Francisco, and we thought that that was going to be a blockbuster. Obviously, that was for not only the NFC West, but for the 1 seed in the conference. And what you saw there was, maybe not by the indication of the final score, but if you watch that game closely Saturday night, that was a total dismemberment by that Seahawk defense. And I have to say, Sam Darnold, a guy that I feel a little bit better about as far as one who could deliver in a big game, but now he's going to get to the deep end of the pool. But thankfully, he has a bye based on his performance there Saturday night, where he moved the chains, made throws. I understand he didn't throw a 4-touchdown pass, and the numbers do not look sexy at the end of the game, but he did what he had to do as maybe not the game manager that he is, because he is able to throw the ball over a lot. He has his weapons. We know who the cast of characters are. But for him to play a very efficient game and for them to be opportunistic defensively, especially with that interception there deep in their own territory, where Christian McCaffrey went in and out of his hands and was intercepted there. And at the time, I think it was 10-3 was the score. Maybe it was 13-3 at the time. But the Seahawks, who had opportunities, that game should have been 27-3. That's how great they played. And even though you look at the final score and say, oh, all right, well, Seattle's kind of squeaked by. They were the dominant team throughout. The Niners, they're depleted. They didn't have Trent Williams. We know how they are compromised on the defensive side of the ball. And therefore, the Niners are going to have the long route to a Super Bowl, which means that they're going to have to go 3 games on the road to get to, of all places, Santa Clara, because that's where the Super Bowl is being played. So because of Seattle winning the NFC West and them having they're a 1 seed for a reason. And are they the team to beat? I'm sure people in Philadelphia are going to argue that. I'm sure people in LA with the Rams would argue that as well. But with Darnold, I don't fully trust him, although I have a little bit better belief that he could win a game. But we're going to have to wait and see in 2 weeks whether or not who that matchup is going to be. And it could be the Rams. Because the Rams won that 4-5 game, which we would expect against Carolina, and the teams beneath them, whether that be the Packers in Chicago or San Francisco or Philadelphia, they fail to win those games. And guess what? The Rams are going to go to Seattle and play in a divisional round. And that is going to be a fascinating game considering what we saw there, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, 2 weeks ago on that Thursday night. So Seattle's not out of the woods yet. And even though we could say 1 seed and the bye, I don't think it's a clear-cut path for them to get to a Super Bowl, because to me that first game is going to mean everything. Now, if Green Bay were to win their game, they would go to Seattle, which I'm sure that's what the Seahawks fan wants. And then you have a situation where, let's say the Niners win their game, and even if the Rams win, but the lowest seed is going to go to Seattle. That could also mean San Francisco. Now, I understand a lot's going to have to unfold in order to get to that point, but that's why I'm not looking at the Seahawks as a sure lock to get out of the NFC, because they may actually face their 2 divisional opponents in the divisional round. We would think maybe the Rams, but it could be San Francisco as well. So keep that in mind as we move it along here. And then you have yesterday, which there really isn't much to discuss as far as the games. Now, maybe I should spend a minute on this Myles Garrett sack record and how he got that sack with about, 4:45 to go in the fourth quarter. And listen, to me, was it Brett Favre, Michael Strahan? No, it wasn't to that level. But it was certainly, I'll say, a homeless version of that. Because when Myles Garrett beat his man Orlando Brown off the edge, and yes, it did look like he had a path to get to Burrow, but Burrow actually looked like he was taking a step forward, and he could have avoided the rush, but I'm sure he knew who was coming at him, and at the same time, he probably felt like, you know what? It's getting late in the game, less than 5 minutes ago, let me just, instead of slip out and try to get to maybe outside the edge or maybe run or try to extend the play, he just took a dive. Myles Garrett gets his sack. Listen, it's not as bad as the Strahan sack. What was it, 22 years ago, 23, 24 years ago, now 2002, whenever it was. But come on, was that a legitimate sack? I understand the record books is going to count that way, but I didn't see it that way. I'm sure people in Cleveland are going to lambaste me to say, JAYREELZ, you're off your rocker, you don't know. But come on. Seeing that from the eye, that wasn't him off the edge, and Burrow got buried into the Paycor Stadium turf, or whatever the name of that stadium is. That was one where he knew number 95 was within a couple of feet, and he figured, you know what, let me give him his sack, let him celebrate, and away we go. And speaking of the Browns, Kevin Stefanski out. I believe the GM is still there. So Stefanski, who's been a 2-time Coach of the Year there in Cleveland. And listen, he didn't have much to work with this year. I mean, seriously, they didn't have Deshaun Watson, as we know, with the Achilles. He had to work with Joe Flacco, got traded midseason, then Dylan Gabriel, then Shedeur Sanders. I mean, is it really all his fault? I understand they're going to make a change. I would have given him next year, and if he didn't have a good year next year, then fine, you cut bait, but I get it. So what have you done for me lately, business? And obviously the Browns have done nothing lately, so therefore he gets his pink slip. But as far as any other news and notes there, how about the Jets not recording an interception all year? I mean, 17 games in a passing league, you couldn't even walk into a gift center field interception or a tip ball high in the air. I mean, they didn't have one pick all year. How does that happen? This isn't the NFL, the 50s and 60s, when they're trying to 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I mean, that's just typical. And with the Giants winning yesterday against the Cowboys, and even though the Raiders won, they still get the number 1 overall pick, but I believe the Jets will pick 2. If I take a look at the 2026 draft order, which I did not pull up. Here it is. Jets, I believe, now have the number 2 pick overall. And which is difficult because you already know that the Raiders are going to pick Fernando Mendoza with the number 1 pick. And the Jets do have the number 2 pick. This mock draft has them picking Dante Moore. All right, the kid from Oregon. But they won't get Mendoza, and they're not going to trade up. Because the Raiders are going to, and who knows, even if the Jets were dumb enough to do that, where they would just drop a pick and try to take one of the 5 first-round picks that the Jets have, with the Colt one this year, the Colt one the following year, and then the Cowboy pick. But the Jets still should get a quarterback there at number 2. So all isn't lost, even though that the Giants, they currently had the number 2 pick overall, but then by them beating the Cowboys, not anymore. The Jets have the 2 pick overall. But other than that, and the Houston come back there against the Colts, where the Colts try to make it interesting there late. And remember, this was not Phillip Rivers. It was Riley Leonard, who actually had a pretty good game. But with the Colts winning, they got themselves a 5th seed overall, which is critical, because now I'm going to segue into the final game of the NFL season, game number 272, which was last night in Pittsburgh. And as a lifelong fan, dating back to the mid-70s, 1976 to be exact, when I saw them lose to the Raiders in the AFC Championship game. And then, of course, the Raiders went on to win the Super Bowl, beating the Minnesota Vikings. Last night was, let's face it, it was a gift from the gods. The football gods were shining on the Steelers there with that last kick. And I know people are trying to get at me at the YouTube, on my YouTube channel, with the comments about the missed extra point on Chris Boswell when I said, oh, the wind. And that's first reaction, because the ball was going straight and all of a sudden it took a veer right where the extra point was missed, and I'll get into that in a moment. But for this game, in that 4th quarter, and mind you, the first 3 quarters almost forgotten, because Mike Tomlin was doing everything he could to screw this game up, especially in that first half. Going for it, down 7-0, and I understand he's playing to win. But at 4th, and it looked like 1.5 yards minimum, maybe almost 2 yards. Why is he going for a tush push there? If you're 4th and inches, 4th and a yard, 4th and less than a yard, no brainer, 1,000%. But instead, he goes for a tush push there and gets stopped, turn the ball back over, and I believe on that drive, that's when the Ravens kicked the field goal. And then right before the half, when the Steelers are driving, and even prior to that, on the 10-0 when the Steelers tied the game, I believe it was on that same drive where Aaron Rodgers overthrew, I think that was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, wide open. And he double pumped there. Oh, jeez. But then right before the half, well, the Steelers are driving, and they get the pass interference penalty in the end zone. So now, 2 seconds left. They're going for it there, pretty much at the 1 yard line. And for Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, and even Mike Tomlin for that matter, for them not to go to the tush push and go for a pitch out where Jonnu Smith is in motion going left to right, and you could see the offensive line pull that way, and understand that's where the trick play, because you want to get everybody going right, so then you get Gainwell to go left. But Gainwell is not Barry Sanders. And unfortunately, I could have been able to tackle Gainwell out there because he was left on an island by himself. And for that pitch to foil there at that point, at that moment, I'm thinking, why aren't they going tush push? This was first guess. And we've seen Tomlin screw up these 4th and 1s. Last week in Cleveland, he was a 4th and 1 in Brown territory, deep in Brown territory, I believe almost in the red. And what did he do? He went on a go route for Scotty Miller into the end zone on a timing pattern. Oh, what? I mean, his play calls there are just out of bounds. And that, I thought, was going to be a critical error by them not scoring, and it was going to come back to haunt. As it was, that didn't play into it. Steelers go to touchdown coming out of the half to make it 10-10. Then the fourth quarter went awry. They kicked the field goal to make it 13-10. Then the Ravens, Zay Flowers, I don't know why, and I get it, a lot of respect to Derrick Henry, but when they all pulled right, and when Jackson went left, Lamar that is, I said to myself, this is dangerous. And sure enough, Zay Flowers, there's nobody in his same zip code, area code, etc. Walk-in touchdown, 20 at that time was 17-13. And you thought, okay, hopefully the Steelers come back down. And they did, punched in the end zone. But then, for whatever the reason, just awful. I get it. A lot of that had to do with the communication, with the technology there. Aaron Rodgers couldn't get the play in his helmet. But one of those timeouts were unforgivable. The one timeout where the pass in the seam to Pat Freiermuth, which set him up at the 5-yard line. And I understand Rodgers was running to the line of scrimmage because the Ravens were trying to change personnel. And by running to the line of scrimmage, you're trying to get them off sides where you go from the 5 to the 2.5-yard line. So they were unable to get the ball. They were unable to snap it. Ravens were set. So now Rodgers is trying to see what's going on, make a play. At that point, I believe he was still having trouble with the headset, but he probably could have run his own play. And what happens? He ends up calling a timeout. To me, that was terrible because even if he wasn't getting a play, I could see he's trying to run to set themselves up to draw him off sides. But he didn't have anything. He could have just looked to one of the guys and said, hey, I'm going to throw an out or whatever it is and just clock it. I understand you lose it down, but you'd rather lose it down there than a timeout. And as it was, then a play after that, as Rodgers is trying to get the play, they had to call another timeout. Oh, that was just painful. And I thought that those timeouts were going to come back to bite them. And thankfully it didn't. They get into the end zone, touchdown, 20-17. And then another Zay Flowers episode where the defense was out to sea. Another walk-in end zone job. And now you got what? 2:20 to go in the game. And even then, I felt good. Steelers had moved the ball in the Ravens. I didn't worry. I didn't panic. If you can go back and watch the live stream on the YouTube channel. I got the whole thing recorded. If you want to fast forward to that point of the game, and you'll see the clock is on, you'll see it. And don't forget, next Monday night, live stream. Join me. So now you had a situation where 2:20, no timeouts. They had the warning, but they moved the ball down the field, etc. And then Calvin Austin, 55 seconds left, fakes out his man there. I forgot who the corner was. It wasn't Nate Wiggins. And you didn't have Kyle Hamilton there who left with a concussion. Walk-in touchdown for Austin, but now I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I wish, and it would have been dangerous. You don't want to have him go down. Let's say if he was able to get down at the 1-yard line with no timeouts, 55 seconds, because then you're going to punch it in on the next play. So I get it. You want to get the touchdown. You got the lead. Fine. I get it. But they still had 55 seconds and 3 timeouts. And they need a field goal to tie. Or so we thought. Then Chris Boswell, money that he is, misses the extra point. Sails wide right. He didn't push it wide right. It looked like it was going right through it. All of a sudden it took off. And then people are trying to get at me. All the wind. I mean, I'll get back at them in the comments. So now it's 26-24. Ravens need a field goal to win. Like I said, all timeouts, 55 seconds in eternity. The kickoff, they return it to near midfield. Now I'm thinking, forget about it. This game's over. One play, they're in field goal range, and it's over. Now you get a scenario where the Steelers, they get a penalty, not the Steelers themselves, Ravens, and now it gets to 4th and 7. And you're thinking to yourself, one more stop. And what does Jackson do? He eludes the rush by TJ Watt. Throws it up in the air. Isaiah likely comes down with it. And even with Jalen Ramsey looking like he wanted to try to bat it out of his hands, corrals the pass. And now they're set up at the 24-yard line. And I thought for sure at that moment the game was over. I mean, how could you not? So then the next snap, I think it was at 12 seconds at that point. Next snap, the quarterback Jackson, he takes a knee to get to the middle of the field, which is always dangerous because even though it's aligned perfectly, but, and in this case, the football gods, like I said earlier, that's what came back to shine on the Steelers, because then now you bring in Tyler Loop, the rookie kicker who's had a very good year, and the snap was clean. Placement, laces to the goalposts, and he pushed it wide right. And when it went up, it looked like it was going, but then you could see it was starting to veer. And when he missed it, I got out of my seat, I ran into my kitchen, and I was euphoric. There's nothing else to say. This was a gift from the gods. The Steelers should have lost the game. And that was what, a 44-yard field goal? And in this day and age, 44 yards is a chip shot. And it wasn't even windy that night. As I understand, the fans were getting at me. But, man, I was up till 1:30 in the morning, replaying everything in my head. Just another installment of this Ravens-Steeler rivalry that will be remembered forever. And it was a win-or-go-home game. And I tell you, I can't stand the Ravens, as everybody knows. I can't stand their coach, I can't stand the team, etc. But I got a level with those fans. I feel your pain. That is one that you won't. I mean, listen, if that would have went through the uprights, I would have been sick this morning. I wouldn't be able to sleep. And that's the beauty of sports. When it involves your team and you win, it's nothing greater. And when it involves the team that you lose, you remember it forever. It sticks to your ribs. You'll never get rid of it. You can win the next 5 Super Bowls. And yeah, you could be cheering and crazy, whatever, but when you look back at the 2025 season, how it was on the leg of Tyler Luke to push them into the postseason and have a home game against Baltimore the following Monday, and you missed it, you're going to be sick thinking about it. But that's the beauty of sports. That's why I watch. That's why I love. That's why it's in my blood. And I got to post that final video because on the YouTube channel, I post up a lot of different clips of the final minutes of the game. And I do have the field goal miss. So you'll see my reaction. I'll post it up after. It'll be up by now. But after I'm done with the recording and posting the podcast, you'll see it'll be on the channel. I just got to do a quick edit because it had some copyright issues, which there shouldn't be any. But be it as it may, you'll watch it, you'll see it for yourself, and you'll have to join me next Monday for the Texans and Steelers in the playoffs. And hopefully it's a good game, a close game like that, but not to the final buzzer to where, I was just ready to have my heart ripped out of my chest. So that is your NFL, and that is your Steelers. Now, as far as the schedule goes for the wild card, and I'll preview the games on Thursday on the podcast then. I'm not going to preview that now. But here's your scenario. I thought that the playoff schedule would have been the following. First game I knew was going to be Rams at Carolina. I thought the night game they would go with Buffalo-Jacksonville because we saw Jacksonville a few years ago when they played the Chargers on that Saturday night. I thought that they were going to go there. Sunday, I thought New England would have been the first game against the Chargers. The second game I thought would have been Green Bay, Chicago, and that they would have saved San Francisco, Philadelphia for the night game. Now, I understand why they put San Francisco, Philly on Sunday because San Francisco played Saturday night, so they figured to give them the afternoon. But I thought they would play them Sunday night. Listen, you got the Bay Area, Philadelphia, you got 2 huge markets, and they're the defending Super Bowl champs. And then Monday night would have been, obviously, Houston, Pittsburgh. But instead, you have Green Bay, Chicago Saturday night on Prime. Sunday afternoon, you have Buffalo at Jacksonville. San Francisco at Philly is the 4:30 game. And then the night game on NBC is Chargers at New England. I hate that game for that time slot. Hate it. I mean, as bad as it is, it's going to be cold, windy. Chargers are a warm weather team. They have to go there, and I understand. It could have been at 1 o'clock, and it'd be 20 degrees with the wind chill in the teens. Understood. But now that game could be in the low 20s or upper teens with the wind chill in the single digits. Chargers are going to have a snowball chance in hell to win that game. I hate it. Hate the game. So, and of course, they're going to put the winner of last night's game on Monday night. They're not going to put them Sunday night. They're not going to put them Saturday for sure or Sunday. You knew that was going to be Monday night. So that's your schedule. I'll preview the games there on Thursday, so you'll have to come back to the podcast then to check that out. All right, now I'm going to stick with the football, but I'll stay this time in the college circuit, or I should not stay. I'll transition to the college circuit. And I'll preview the semifinal because you're going to have the semifinal and the final, which will be the following week, of course. But the two semifinal games you have Thursday and Friday, which I'll talk about then. But the stage is already set for that. But as far as the quarterfinals go, you had the one great game with Ole Miss and Georgia. I know it's a few days away. I won't have a complete breakdown of all these games because you've already seen the highlights, you've already digested it, you've already consumed it, etc. But big picture of what we saw in the quarterfinals, it was a dud. Miami got off to that 14-0 lead at the half, and even though Ohio State made it interesting by making it 17-14, but on the game's critical drive, they had to move the chains, and then they punched it into the end zone and won 24-14, and that's your game. Julian Sain and also the head coach there, Ryan Day, had no answers in the first half. Miami defense was stout. Now, Ohio State was able to move the ball second half, as you saw, but Miami, when they absolutely had to get that drive with the lead, and they got first downs, and when they got paid dirt at the end, that's when you knew the game was over. And the defending champ, out, gone, kaput. Buckeyes now are shut-eye until spring practice. That's game number one, and that was on New Year's Eve. The games there on New Year's Day, I mean, what can you say about Texas Tech? To me, it was more about Texas Tech than Oregon in my eyes because, and give it up for the Oregon defense, because the Texas Tech offense, you could get a GPS, a magnifying glass, a roadmap, and you still can't find them. Baron Morton was awful in the game, bunch of turnovers, and even when they had a shot to get in the game at 13-0, when they were, I believe it was first and goal, and what does he do? He throws a pick in the corner of the end zone. And double coverage. I mean, that's just indicative of how awful the Red Raider offense was. And give it up. Dante Moore made some plays. And Oregon right now, they're the team that, who knows? Last year, remember, they were a 1 seed. And weren't they number 1 overall? Yeah, they were. They were undefeated. And then Ohio State went in there and killed them in a Rose Bowl. And now maybe Oregon looking at it this year, thinking that, well, hey, maybe this is our time, which I'll preview Thursday, but I do have a very interesting storyline when it comes to the next team, which this game was nothing to talk about. Indiana literally just had their way with Alabama. First drive notwithstanding, considering that Alabama had 2 sacks on the opening drive, and you thought to yourself, ooh, could this be the Alabama defense we saw in the second half against Oklahoma? Now, all of a sudden, carry over into the game against Indiana, which I talked about Indiana in my 3 big storylines. The pressure that's going to be on them, considering undefeated, number 1 team in the nation, to go ahead and win a national title, which obviously has never been done in the history of their school. And after that, it was game on. Mendoza, obviously the quarterback, looking very good. They had the big fumble there with Ty Simpson. What was it? I think it was 17-0, but when they had a shot to get in the game. And then what was Alabama doing at 24-0, kicking a field goal there late in the third quarter or early fourth quarter, whatever it was? I mean, that was a disgrace. Here was the same guy, Kalen DeBoer, in the previous game against Oklahoma. They were down 17-0. I understand it was early second quarter. 4th and 2, deep in their territory. They went for it. And on that play, they scored a touchdown. So here it is, 24-0. You need a touchdown to at least, and the game was over, 24-0, but score a touchdown, get a 2-point conversion. Now you're down by 2 scores. What does he do? He kicks a field goal. Why? Because he doesn't want to get shut out? I mean, that was just terrible. Awful. But as it was, Indiana had their way. Alabama did not belong on that same field with the Hoosiers. As crazy as that is to sound. I'm not talking basketball either. But in the night game, that was the game where Georgia, who beat Ole Miss back in October, got their payback. And Trinidad Chambliss was fantastic. They were trailing in the game. What was it, 21-12? And then came storming back. Then Georgia came back there late. to tie the game at 34. I know Kirby Smart, there was a bonehead play where they had a snap on 4th and 2. He said that it shouldn't have been snapped, etc. And I understand that. But Georgia came back. They tied the game. And it's interesting because in the game in October, the Rebels were up by 9. What was this final score of that game? Was it 35-42? Yeah, I think they were up 35-26 in the game. And Georgia won by whatever it was. I forgot the final score. I think it was 42-35 or 41-35, whatever it was. And now here it was. Ole Miss was down by 9. And they came back and won the game. Now, mind you, they were up 34-24. And they let Georgia come back, despite the gaffe there with that 4th and 2. And then Chambliss drove them down the field, kicked the game-winning field goal, 9 seconds to go, and then they had the kickoff where they tried to trick play, well, not trick play, but they tried to lateral it, and then it went out of bounds. It was a safety, and that was the game. But give it up, Ole Miss. And one of the storylines I had about Ole Miss was with Lane Kiffin leaving, and then you heard about reports about Lane Kiffin trying to get on the field and all that because the game was in Louisiana, and they didn't allow him to. Rightfully so. He left the team. There's no way he should have been a part of that celebration. He left them, so therefore he has no right to be in the company of his former staff, players, etc. So good for them for not letting him to be a part of that. But the one thing I'll say before I get to the Final Four, the one thing I'll say is that Ole Miss, this is a team that they're going up against another, if you want to say Cinderella, which is going to be interesting because Ole Miss with their offense against Miami's defense, and even though Carson Beck, he's been around Georgia, obviously here in Miami. But the one thing for certain is that one of those two teams is going to have a glass slipper when it's all said and done. Which one? I don't know. We'll talk about it more on Thursday. But I tell you, that was the best game out of the 4. And if that wasn't going to be a good game, it would have been a big giant dud of a quarterfinal. Now, I pulled up the wrong game. That's what it was. Yeah, I was kind of just going back looking at stats here of this game where Ole Miss, listen, give it up. And that's a theme that we've seen here too, which are going to lead to the next one, which it could be more of a storyline. I'll give you a little teaser. We've seen teams that have lost in the regular season, Alabama and Oklahoma, Ole Miss to Georgia, they've come back and won those games. And now you have a scenario where Ole Miss did not play Miami, but Oregon is going to play Indiana. And remember, that game in Eugene where at 20-13, Fernando Mendoza threw a pick 6 there in the 4th quarter. And how did he respond? Came back to the next drive, touchdown. And then after that, they kicked the field goal and they won, I think it was 30-20 was the final score. So you got to wonder, is Oregon kind of feeling that same magic? That I'll expound on a little bit more. But here's the bigger question that I ask. Because you don't have the defending champ there out, the consensus pick from a lot of people that thought that Georgia was going to be the last team standing on the college football mountaintop, they're out. And although there are rivals in the Big Ten, granted that Oregon just got to the Big Ten, but Indiana, is this a lock for them to win a national championship? I mean, based on their play against Alabama, maybe that's more of an indictment on Alabama than it was on Indiana, but you got to give Indiana their props. Now, am I a team that could think they could win the whole thing? Of course, I'm not stupid. I saw what I saw. But you'd also have to think that this team hasn't faced any pressure yet. Pretty much the whole year. Maybe that Oregon game notwithstanding. I'll take that. But the game was tied and they had the ball. It wasn't as if they were trailing in the game. Granted, it was a pick 6, but it wasn't as if they were trailing in the game and they really had to make a statement. And Oregon, they're going to play fast and loose. You talk about a team that has house money, that is the Oregon Ducks. But Indiana, is this a lock? Because now they're going to go up against Oregon, and then the winner of Ole Miss and Miami. They're not playing any of the big-time powerhouse teams, and I get it. Give credit to Miami, Ole Miss, and Oregon for winning their games and getting to the point where they're at. They deserved it. They earned it. But now I almost think that that's more pressure for Indiana, knowing. And Kurt Cignetti's not going to take that angle, but us as fans when we watch. But yeah, what's going to happen if Oregon, it's, let's say, mid-third quarter, and Mendoza's throwing a couple of picks, maybe a fumble here and there, and Oregon is up 19-7. Giving you a weird score there. Or 20-7. How about that? Round it off. 20-7, and they have the ball starting at the 18-yard line. Indiana. That's where you want to see them rise to the occasion. That's when you want to see the quarterback delivery, even the coach for that matter. Does that sideline get tight? Does that coaching staff get tight? Do they get conservative? And Cignetti got conservative last year when Curtis Rourke was his quarterback. Granted, the game was over against Notre Dame, but still. Something to keep in mind for Thursday's podcast as we move it along, but that is your college football, people. All right, now let me turn my attention to the association. I don't really have much with the fall and winter sports. The only big news that we've seen here over the last week, and it happened last Monday down in Miami, was Nikola Jokic suffering that knee injury at the end of the first half where his own teammate ran into him. And thankfully, the MRI came back where it was just hyperextended, no ligament or structural damage, which is not only enormous for the Nuggets, but I also think it's big for the NBA. Now, he's going to miss 4 weeks. He's going to be reevaluated at that time, which means he's probably not going to win an MVP. Obviously, him being in the running for that, granted that we haven't even got to the halfway point, we're getting closer to it. But I think that is the NBA and the Nuggets, and more importantly, dodged a missile. Because to not see that guy on a night-in, night-out basis with the numbers that he's put up and how he's performed here, the guy on Christmas had a 56-point triple-double. I understand it went to overtime, but still. That guy's a walking triple-double at center. And if he was going to be gone for the remainder of the year, that would have been a devastating blow to the Nuggets and to the NBA. I'm sorry. And I get it. Nobody really pays attention to the regular season. But still, if he was gone for the season, you're not going to see the Nuggets go far in the playoffs without him. Look, they lost to the Nets last night. I understand the Nets have played better, but they are the Nets out in Brooklyn last night. And they play the Sixers tonight in Philly. But listen, you don't want to see your superstars in any sport go down for a significant amount of time. But that is one where, as a fan, I'm just grateful. It's reevaluation. It's not as if he's going to come back in 4 weeks. We're going to see how the knee responds, etc. And I'm sure he's probably going to wear a sleeve or I don't know about a brace. But that was one that, I tell you, Adam Silver and the powers that be down there on Fifth Avenue, you talk about they exhaled over their cappuccino and their buttered croissant. Because the last thing that they want is to have a big superstar out for any significant amount of time. And that being a guy who has won 3 MVPs and could be on the verge of getting a 4th one this year. And probably not, because you got to have the minimum 65 games. And who knows how many games he's going to miss here. So, but the good thing is that he will be back strong, healthy, ready to go when he's available to come back. So that's something just to keep in mind. But besides that, I know the Celtics, they played, listen, they started off 5-7. If you do the math, I mean, the team has been, I don't even know what to say. 5-7, and since then they've been 17-5. And Jaylen Brown had a 50-piece there the other night, and I understand he's a little bitter that the other Jalen won the Player of the Month last month, that being Jalen Brunson. Just keep your head down and keep plugging away. As the Celtics are 22-12, a half game, I might add, behind the Knicks in the Eastern Conference. And you got a big game in the NBA tonight, which I'll get to in a moment when I go through the schedule. But besides that, NBA has been rather low-key. Nothing to really sink your teeth into, nothing to really get into as far as like, oh, this team has won this, or wow, this team has fallen apart, or what have you. The teams are where they are right now in the standings. And as I go through it, yeah, we talked about the East. Yeah, Toronto still played well. Sixers have played better. Magic, Heat, Cleveland. Bucks, half game behind the Hawks for the final seed in the Eastern Conference. And then the rest of the rest. Pacers have lost 12 in a row, though. 6-30. You talk about tanking the season. I mean, maybe they are. Who knows? But then out west, I know the Thunder lost to the Suns yesterday thanks to Devin Booker's 3 at the buzzer or late in the game. But besides that, I know Wemby also had hyperextended his knee, but I guess he's fine. Nothing else to really report. Yeah, I mean, it's just, come on. I'm going to get to Draymond getting ejected for another please. I've had enough. To me, that's old news for him. But that's your NBA. I wish I had more to discuss or get into, but that is it. Now, as far as the schedule for the week, here's your big game in the NBA tonight. And it's on Peacock for those who have it. New York, the Knicks in Detroit. I believe it's the first matchup since the first round of the playoffs last year. And the Pistons are 3 games ahead of the Knicks as currently constituted. So how that's going to shape up, I am fascinated to see. So we could talk about that on Thursday's podcast to see how the Knicks fare throughout this early part of the week. But you have the Bulls in Boston, Atlanta, Toronto, Phoenix at Houston. These are the games tonight. Golden State at the Clippers, Utah, Portland, Charlotte, Oklahoma City. Tomorrow, Cleveland, Indiana, Orlando, Washington, San Antonio, Memphis, Miami at Minnesota. And Minnesota just played in Miami a couple days ago. And I believe didn't the T-Wolves win that game? You also have LA at New Orleans, Lakers that is, and Dallas at Sacramento. Light schedule there Tuesday. The NBC games they have is Miami, Minnesota, and Dallas, Sacramento. And then your ESPN games on Wednesday, Denver at Boston. So after Philadelphia tonight for the Nuggets, they'll go up to Boston. The Lakers in San Antonio, that's your 9:30 game. And then the other games, Chicago, Detroit, Toronto, Charlotte, Orlando at Brooklyn, Clippers in New York for the Knicks, Phoenix, Memphis, Utah, Oklahoma City, Milwaukee, Golden State, Houston, Portland. Some good games, but nothing really to get too crazy over when you're looking at the NBA. Now, real quick with the college basketball, I'm just going to get to this because now that we're into January and we're in a situation where I will start paying attention more. Conference play has already kicked in. Right now, Michigan looks like they're going to be the team to beat. Arizona, too, you got to give them their props as well. I know Arizona and even Gonzaga's played well. But you got a lot of top-heavy teams. Unlike years past where you had teams that have mix and match, it seemed like from one day to the next, whomever was at number 1 drops out. You had a lot of that over the last 2 or 3 years. This year, not the case. You got teams that are rock solid. We're staying at the top and we're not going anywhere. So we will certainly keep our eyes on that as we move it along. Your top 10 are Michigan, Arizona, Iowa State, UConn, Duke is your top 5. Then Purdue, Gonzaga, Houston, Michigan State, BYU. So, yeah, you got those teams at the top that are obviously excellent. And I will monitor that as we move it along. Now as I lace up my skates to take a trip around the ice, to me there's just 2 themes here. Listen, the Winter Classic was anything but. I watched bits and pieces of it. You had no feel to the game, and I get it that the Rangers won a ho-hum 5-1 game. Mika Zibanejad with a hat trick. And the game was in Lone Depot Park, the home of the Marlins. Had the roof open, the outdoor panels open too. They had the makeshift snow and the ice and all that, as you know, on the surface for the players to play on, of course. But that game felt like it was in an airport hangar. And I understand the roof was open, but you couldn't really hear the crowd. Obviously, you had a lot of Ranger fans in the building. To me, the feel was just off. And I understand the game was a blowout for hockey standards, but that was one where I couldn't really get into. I'm sorry. And you're going to see an outdoor game in Tampa next month where the Lightning are going to play at Raymond James, where the Buccaneers play. So who knows how that's going to unfold with the weather. And obviously that's going to be outdoor with a game in Miami that have the roof open, but in essence it's an indoor game. And I believe the temperature at game time that night was in the mid-60s, which I get it is chilly for Miami, but for the northern part of the country, that is like summer. But we'll see what happens in Tampa. I believe that's an afternoon game. I don't think that's a night game in Tampa. But as we get closer, we'll certainly touch on that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was Colorado. Yesterday, they reached the halfway point of their season, and they actually had a 10-game winning streak going into Florida, the aforementioned Panthers. No, not an outdoor game. They were back in their friendly confines in Sunrise. But the Panthers actually beat the Avalanche in regulation to where they suffered their third regulation loss. The last one, if you recall, was to the Islanders back about, last month, I believe. It was right after Thanksgiving, wasn't it? Easily within the last month. And they had won 10 in a row. They were, 31-2-7. Now they're 31-3-7 at the halfway mark. Now, the wins record, I don't know if it's going to be reachable. It still is, I guess. But they're going to have to win 34 games here throughout the second half. But they are on pace to eclipse the all-time single-season point record by the Bruins just 3 years ago. And if you recall, they got ousted by the Panthers in the first round of the playoffs. So I don't know if you want to get that distinction to the Avalanche fan, to the front office organization, etc., because we saw what that did for the Bruins 3 years ago. And then 3 years prior to that, if you recall, the Tampa Bay Lightning had the record for most wins and most points in a regular season. And what happened to them? They got swept by Columbus. So, and we all know that the President's Trophy means diddly squat. And it's not to say that the Avalanche should pump the brakes or should take it easy the second half so they don't win the President's Trophy. No, but they're on a record pace, and record pace does not equate to, let alone Stanley Cup final appearances, but winning a Stanley Cup overall. Something to keep in mind as we move into the second half, because a lot of the teams are in the second half of their year. As I pull up the standings, you have a couple teams, over 40, Canadians 42, Red Wings 43. Everybody's mostly at the halfway point, and a few teams are past. And what we could say here right now, the Lightning are hot. They've overtaken the Canadians. They've won 7 in a row. And I believe their last loss, wasn't it to the Islanders? If I go back and pull up the schedule, no, I'll spare that. Maybe on Thursday I'll do a little first half review, second half preview of the NHL. Sabres have played actually better. Maple Leafs are in last place. Berube could be in trouble. And how about the game the other day against the Islanders, overtime, where Matthew Schaefer had the 2 goals, including the overtime winner? I mean, he's been unbelievable. But I'd be worried about the Maple Leafs here. Now, I understand they got 45 points. Only 8 points separates them between the Maple Leafs at the bottom and the Leafs at the top. So they're a good winning streak to being back middle of the pack or even close to the top of the division there in the Atlantic. Now, Penguins have won 5 in a row. Bit of a logjam there. You have Capitals, Penguins, Flyers, Islanders, all separated by 1 point. Islanders are 3 points behind the Hurricanes there for the top spot in the Atlantic. Out west in the Central, you know about the Avalanche, 11 points ahead of the Stars, who have lost 5 in a row. They've really hit the skids here recently. So now the Avalanche have got some separation there in the division. Minnesota now tied, if I see that correctly, I need my glasses, tied with the Stars there for second place. And remember, whomever gets the 2 seed will host that team in the 3 slot come playoff time. And then out west in the Pacific, you have Vegas, Edmonton, and Anaheim separated by 1 point. Seattle, 3 points, as well as the Kings and the Sharks. So you got 6 teams separated by 3 points there in the Pacific, which should mean very good competitive hockey here as you go into the second half of the season. And as you know, I'm all for it. As far as the schedule, Utah will finish their trip in New York. They played the Islanders and killed them on Thursday night. Then the Devils beat Utah Saturday, and then that will encapsulate with a trip to the Garden, where the Mammoth will conclude their little tri-state area trip. Anaheim at Washington, Detroit, Ottawa, Seattle, Calgary, Minnesota at the Kings. That is tonight. Tomorrow, Vancouver at Buffalo, Colorado at Tampa, Anaheim at Philly, Dallas at Carolina, Jersey at New York, the Islanders, Florida, Toronto. And then you have, Nashville, Edmonton, Columbus, San Jose. And then Wednesday, Dallas at Washington, Calgary, Montreal, St. Louis, Chicago, San Jose. Yeah, so NHL schedule is kind of weak. Colorado, Tampa tomorrow. That'd be pretty good to watch. Maybe Anaheim, Philly, because Philly's been playing well. But that's what you have there in the NHL. And then lastly, as I put on the spikes and get in the batter's box with some baseball, and I got news for you. To the baseball fan out there, I got some good news and some bad news. What do you want to start off with? Excuse me. Let's start off with the good news. Why not? 5 weeks from this coming Wednesday, count them, 5, one hand, pitchers and catchers will start reporting. It'll be here before you know it. That will be the Wednesday after the Super Bowl. So, let's get ready. Nah, it's still 5 weeks away. Spring is still more than 2 months away. I get it. But pitchers and catchers, it always, that hope springs eternal. You start thinking about baseball because football's over with. For those who aren't into the hockey and basketball, and even the baseball, not that that's a sport that everybody's gravitating to, but that's a good. We'll start there. Here's the bad, though. Or maybe they're not so good, depending on how you look at it. All these top free agents, Cody Bellinger, Bo Bichette, Framber Valdez, Alex Bregman, Kyle Tucker. Shall I continue? All these guys have not signed on the dotted line. What is happening here? What is going on? Are we going to have another one of those situations where right before the position players report, which is, I believe, 6 or 7 days after the pitchers and catchers report, probably by February 20th. Because remember, the baseball season starts early. I think it starts the 26th this year. So what does that mean? These guys are going to sign one-year deals. And remember, the CBA, the Players Union, and the owners, they're on the clock. Do the math. We're now less than 11 months away from Armageddon in baseball. So I don't know if there's been any talks. I haven't heard rumblings. I haven't heard a peep on whether or not discussions have been broached. And I would have to think in my gut of guts, not a peep has been made. Not a text, a phone call, a smoke signal has been sent by Rob Manfred to Tony Clark, the head of the Players Union. So I don't know. But as far as the free agents in this year, who knows? You haven't seen a big-time contract been pushed to the middle of the table. Yes, we know about Edwin Diaz signing. Yes, we know about Pete Alonso, 5 for $150. We get all that. But some of these guys, especially Tucker, who's looking for $400 million. Cody Bellinger, I heard the Yankees gave a contract offer. He declined it, and now they may have a second offer coming, which I didn't even hear about. I got to shout out my guy, Tatsuya/Rhoda/Cow/ it's a guy, one of my dear followers, subscribers on YouTube. Shout out to him. But, yeah, you haven't even heard a rumor. You haven't heard anything. Oh, looks like Bellinger's going here. Oh, Kyle Tucker, I think he's going to go there. Oh, you got 3 teams in the running for Alex Bregman. Oh, Framber Valdez has a home. Nothing. And that's why 5 weeks from now, they're going to start reporting. This is going to be like the year of Manny Machado and Bryce Harper when they signed on a dotted line literally hours before they drove down to their spring training sites and got their John Hancocks on the dotted line. I mean, is this what's going to boil down to, Major League Baseball? Scott Boras, this means you? Because you're the one that's pretty much the ringleader of all this. I don't know, but I'll be on top of it. But this is where baseball, they get lost in the shuffle here. everybody's wrapped up in the wild card in football, in the college football playoff, maybe some in the college basketball, NBA, etc. So, although it'll be big news, and let me see if anything, watch as I say this now, was somebody signed on the dotted line, I'll be like, oh, big signing in baseball. Oh, the Raiders fired him. Pete Carroll. And Joe Shane's returning, to the chagrin of the Giant fan. Ugh. That's not good. And the Cardinals fired Jonathan Gannon. That's no surprise. Not all his fault, but I get it. So Black Monday, Kevin Stefanski gone, Jonathan Gannon gone in Arizona, Pete Carroll. That was a disaster. And I totally misplayed that. I thought by him going there, resuscitate that franchise. Geno Smith knows it from his days in Seattle. And I'm not making Geno Smith out to be Randall Cunningham, but yeah, disastrous year. Falcons fire Raheem Morris. I didn't talk about that. And the GM, Wayne Fontenot. And even though I know Terry Fontenot, I said Wayne. Terry Fontenot. And I know they finished their year strong. Even winning over New Orleans, as we talked about earlier in the podcast. But Raheem Morris is not a big-time coach. I mean, come on. And the Bengals are keeping Zach Taylor to the chagrin of my guy, Josh Shields. And they're keeping their top executive on top of that, Duke Tobin. Ugh. I'm sure he is not happy about that. But that's what the football stuff. But going back to baseball real quick before I sign off. You guys are on the clock. And nobody's going to care about Kyle Tucker unless it's $400 million. But that's not going to... They're going to have to do that on a Tuesday. Or do it when... Obviously, not going to do it over the weekend. But right now, everybody's wrapped up in the gridiron. Nobody is even thinking about the diamond. When they had their opportunity last month at the winter meetings in Orlando, either prior to or shortly thereafter, that was their window to get these guys signed. Now that you're into January, and who knows, maybe going into February, these guys not signed, nobody cares. Case closed. But we'll see what happens there as we move it along. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books as always. Thank you so much for stopping by. The first podcast of 2026. If this is your first time, welcome aboard. And if this is your 10th, 20th, 100th, or 630th time, I've done 630 of these podcasts. Not only do I welcome you back, but get ready. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a long ride for 2026 and a good ride. So I'm glad you've hopped on board. I appreciate you carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about the toy department of life called sports. And like I mentioned at the very top, and I'll say it one more time, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Because I got a lot cooking. A lot of content coming forth just this month alone and beyond. So you want to stay locked. I'm at 938, almost 940 subscribers. I'm a little over 60. So with my heart and my hustle, putting out content on a daily basis, true sports content, real, passionate, none of this clickbait, rage bait like I said earlier. We're not doing that here. No, I'm not pulling wool over the eyes, no okey doke, none of that. What you see is what you get, and it's going to be credible, entertaining, knowledgeable sports content. Hit subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Go a long way in gaining traction to the channel to 1,000 subscribers and beyond. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or on Instagram, just JAYREELZ. On Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. On Twitch, JAYREELZ1, just a number. Or the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals with any questions, comments, suggestions, whatever that may be. Because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA, as I've always said since birth. And if you couldn't tell over the course of this hour plus, or even in the beginning as a diehard Steelers fan talking about the Steelers, then you know what? You got to come back for the Wednesday live stream every week, 12 noon Eastern time, or the podcast pregame, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube, both of those on YouTube, or the podcast on Thursday as I'll preview the wild card round in the NFL, preview the semifinals of college football, whatever's happening in the NBA, NHL, college basketball, Major League Baseball, boxing, you name it. I got you covered. All in one podcast. Where else are you going to get that? I'm listening. Still listening. That's right. Because as long as I sit in front of this camera and microphone, I can promise you I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South End, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. Happy New Year to everybody. May this one be the best one yet. Go for yours because life is way too short, people, because Lord knows I'm going for mine. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.